Hi! I noticed that there are two kinds of people. Ones who believe that Ukrainians don't speak English well, and the others who think that they speak very well. What if I tell you that none of this is true?
What?
In this video, I will also speak on how I learned English, which is far from perfect but enough for me, and you can use some of my tips and maybe avoid some mistakes. So, how good an average Ukrainian speaks English is not easy to define. What I mean is that if you take, for example, Sweden, there is no doubt that Swedes speak English very well. There cannot be any second opinion here. And if you take Central Asia countries like Tajikistan, you know that almost no one speaks English here. I never been to Tajikistan, that's something I heard about. Correct me if I'm wrong. Ukraine is not black and white, but I'll tell you a story of how I learned English so you can make your own conclusions by the end of this video. I grew up in Kiev, capital of Ukraine, and I went to a usual school. By usual, I mean that at my first school there was no specialization in something. It was an ordinary, average, good school, and we started with English from the first year. I was 6 years old. If you ask me to remember at least one English class at that time, I cannot. I don't remember even faces of my teachers or how it looked inside a class. My memory just erased it all for some reason. That period of my English learning I would call wasted my time period. Even though I'm pretty sure I got some knowledge, I believe we did not have very effective studies. Just imagine how much you can learn during 4 years of studies of anything, especially when you're a child and if there is a really good plan, study plan. Okay, why I said 4 years? Because I started when I was 6. After 4 years of studies, I had to change the school. And then another stage of my English started. The new school had more English classes, and I remember some more things from that time. Let's call this period slowly but not so surely. I'll explain you now why. In my class there were 3 English schools divided by levels. You probably think that if you are better in English you will go to a group with higher level, but that's not how it was. They divided children into 3 English groups using another system. Your parent had to approach the teacher, the English teacher, talk to the teacher and just personally ask to accept your child to their group. But most want their child to be in the strongest group, right? So imagine what happens if all parents go to the teacher of a stronger group and ask for their child. Well, 2 things can happen. They will accept everybody and the group will be overcrowded, or they will stop accepting at the point when the group is full. What do you think happened? Okay, if you chose the second option, it's wrong. They just accepted you all, and in the end there were like 20 persons in the strong group and 5 in every other group, which in my opinion is not very logical. After all, we all used the same study books, and how strong the group was depended only on the teacher. What do you think? Was it a good solution to accept everyone in one group and make it kind of overcrowded? Write in comments. I remember that we had a male English teacher who from my memory was grumpy and angry at everybody who did not want to study English. And as I said, my memory is very selective and that's actually all I remember of him. So it was in one group. In head of another group, I remember there was an old lady who used to talk about how good for your health is to eat Jerusalem artichoke, also called sunroot. And we also sang Twinkle Twinkle Little Star. And I want to remind you that at that time I was already 10 years old. So I were at all these groups and finally I got into the 3rd group. Finally, I got into the 3rd group, which was my favorite one, and I remember that we actually studied English there. The teacher gave us home assignments and asked us to perform, and I remember that I enjoyed those classes. But I still could not speak English at that point. When I was 14, I changed the school again, but for some reason, I don't know how, I don't recall anything about my English teacher at that school. at all. Maybe if somebody could remind me, I would remember, but right now, nothing. This video is about how I learned English, but so far I have not told you the most important thing. Of course, the most important things don't happen at school, at least not in Ukrainian schools. One important thing is that I have always liked the English language. Since 13-year-old, I listened to music in English and liked looking up the lyrics and translating words which I did not understand. I also watched interviews with my favorite musicians, and I remember that I did not understand anything except for some words and phrases. One of interviews I remember very well was with Avril Lavigne, who is a singer, and it was an old interview, I think 2002 interview, in really bad quality, and she was joking and laughing, and I watched it and thought, I wish I could understand what she's saying. I might never understand, because if I don't understand it now, what can possibly be changed in future? I have been learning English for 10 years already, and I still could not get it. But then, after a few years, I remember rewatching the same interview, and that time I understood almost everything. That was crazy. I was so happy. So what happened during these years? That definitely did not happen at school. That definitely didn't happen at school. That definitely did not happen at school. But before I tell you, here is a quick brain booster for you. What number do you think represents the number of Ukrainians speaking English? You have 5 seconds to choose the answer. It's okay if you just guess. Let's check your intuition. Okay, back to my English. I'll call this period success. On this channel I talk a lot about effectiveness of the language immersion, but I stayed in Ukraine at that time. I did not move to an English-speaking country, but I did something very right. My mom found a really good English teacher. He had developed his own teaching strategy based on, guess what? Language immersion. I did a lot of grammar exercises in writing, where the goal was to repeat the same grammar constructions many times, but in different contexts. For example, if we practiced past tense, I would write similar phrases in past tense using different verbs, different pronouns, and I did it all in writing, which helped me to memorize better. We used lots of common words and phrases in our practice, which I could benefit from later. Okay, so you may wonder now, how did it help me to start figuring out the interview I told you earlier about? The thing is that if you practice the same language constructions enough times, you will never be able to say it wrong. Meaning that even if you don't figure out all of the constructions, or maybe you don't hear all of the construction, your brain does this work for you. You grasp the general meaning. Here is an example. If somebody said, "He's so nice," my brain cannot mistake that for "he's so nice," simply because I practiced present tense in English so many times that I know that there's usually a verb in a sentence, and after objective pronoun his usually comes a noun if it is a subject. My brain deciphers it instantly, making me understand not only how to talk but what to hear. And just like that, by the end of the high school, I could already speak some English and understood quite a lot. And now, last period, which took my English to another level. It was university. Oh, I actually studied to be a translator, and my English classes at the university were pretty intense. Very often it was difficult for me and I could not learn it all. We studied very complicated topics which were hard for me even in my native language. My English definitely got better during those years because I always tried to be a good student. Okay, that was my story, and now it's time for you to judge how well Ukrainians speak English. Now you know the way that English is usually taught in Ukrainian schools, because I were in 3 schools in my life before the university, so I'm sure it helps you to imagine the English level of an average Ukrainian. Is it different in your country? How has your English journey been so far? Like, subscribe and share this video, watch another video to learn more language learning tips, and I'll see you next time.